Hey, we're doing something a little differently today. Bonnie's joining me on this episode, and we're reflecting back on some recent episodes to discuss questions, feedback, and insights that have come out of them. This is Coaching for Leaders, episode 781.
Produced by Innovate Learning, maximizing human potential.
Greetings to you from Orange County, California. This is Coaching for Leaders, and I'm your host, Dave Stachowiak. Leaders aren't born, they're made. And this weekly show helps leaders thrive at key inflection points. Every so often, a couple times a year, Bonni and I get together and have a conversation about questions that have come in from you, our listeners, and responding to them in the best way we can. And we were thinking about this recently. It had been a bit of time since Bonni had been on the show. Hello, by the way. Welcome back.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Everyone always loves having you on and hearing your voice and your perspective, as do I, which is why I married you.
That's good, because we've been married a long time. So if you didn't like having me around, that'd be trouble, because more than 2 decades at this point.
Yes, that would be trouble. We're going strong. So everyone loves hearing from you. I was thinking about our Q&A episodes and like how helpful a lot of times people say your perspective is. And I was also thinking like, it's also odd if the question that came in or that we featured wasn't especially relevant to the person listening at the time. And anyway, we were talking about all kinds of different things we could do. And we're trying something new today. And so you all tell us what you think after you hear this episode. We would love to know, I'd love to know especially, is we're going to actually take a step back and reflect on some of the recent episodes that we've aired in the last 6 months or so, and do a little bit of just pulling out some of the things that have come up, we've reflected on, gotten some feedback on, and maybe do a little bit of a deeper dive on that. And so that's where we're going to go today. And we'd love to hear what you think of this once you hear from it. So Bonni, let's just jump in on our first topic. So one of the episodes that has come up a bunch in my thinking in the last several months for a couple reasons is episode 750, which aired back in the fall with Margaret Andrews. And the episode was titled 6 Questions Every Leader Should Ask About Themselves. And the reason I've been thinking about it a lot, Bonni, is 2 big reasons. One is it was the most downloaded episode we've had over the last 6 months. So it clearly struck a nerve, either the title or the content, or probably a combination of both. And Margaret was fabulous. By the way, Margaret is the author of a book called Manage Yourself to Lead Others. It's also a hugely popular professional development program at Harvard. And one of the things we zeroed in on that episode was 6 questions for self-understanding. And that's the other reason that I've been thinking a lot about it, is because I've been thinking about her questions, and it's come up in the context of a number of conversations that have happened since then with our members and listeners. And she articulated 6 questions that we talked about in that episode. We'll link to it at the end so you can get into the details if you want. I thought it would be really fun for us to each take one of these questions and respond to it. And so we've each picked a question, and I've picked the 3rd question that she posed for us. And I think Bonni has picked the 6th question. So I'm just going to start. And so there's 6 questions. We're going to have them in the notes. But the 3rd question that she invites us to consider in self-understanding, which is so important because she points out in her work that our differences are our features, not our flaws. And knowing ourselves well helps us to lead others better, and also, leading ourselves. And so one of the questions that she invites us to reflect on is, what does success look like for you? And if you heard that episode, you heard her talk about this question through the lens of both the professional and the personal. I thought about this first, Bonni, through the lens of professional, and I'm going to mostly zero in on that for thinking about responding to this, and maybe you'll have some questions for me. But I also have some thoughts on it personally, but I think we'll get to that later on in the conversation based on our last point. So as I was thinking about this question, what does success look like for you? I've been thinking about it and reflecting on it the last few months since hearing that episode and hearing her wisdom on it. And I think I have 3 things that have come up for me. The first one is a quote from Zig Ziglar from years ago that I heard him say on many of the talks of the tapes I used to listen to. And Zig had this great line. He said, "You can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want." I've always loved that line, and I've really tried to focus certainly my career and my professional work around it in every aspect that I can. And the way that it comes up for me most joyfully on a regular basis is in the episodes that we are on the podcast. And I really find so much joy in interviewing someone and getting into the depths of their work as much as I can, of finding something that I find in their work or their book or whatever they're bringing an expertise in, and zeroing in on that and getting as detailed on questions and some of the practical things as we possibly can, and helping them shine in a conversation that really features their work well. And then to have them, hopefully at the end of that conversation, say, wow, that was really great. Like, we really had an in-depth practical conversation. It was really great that we got into the depth of this. And then to, if we do a good job of that, and especially if I do a good job of that, then weeks later when I hear the episode air, I've had people reflect that back to both of us to say, wow, that was really helpful, or I did something with this, or that perspective helped me to think about how I lead in my organization, or has brought joy into my work in some way. That is super, super joyful for me. And the other time that this comes up a lot is in working with our members, our academy members especially, and seeing them get to where they need to go, get what they need and want in their work and their organization, and to have a win come out of that. And fortunately, I get to hear that a lot in my work. I get to hear that almost every day, either over email or verbally. And it really keeps me going, Bonnie. It's really fun and really joyful. And I heard Zig Ziglar, no, not Zig. I heard Seth Godin talk about this quote from Zig Ziglar a while back. He's apparently a fan of the quote too. And he said, it's really nice if you can get to a place in your life where you sort of set the first part of that quote aside, where you can have everything in life you want if you'll just help enough other people get what they want. And you can just think about, how do I help other people get what they want? And not worry so much about what you're getting out of it. Because if you do a good job with the second, the first one will take care of itself. And you and I both have a lot of privilege in our work and in our relationships and where we live and the education we've had. And I do still think about, like, what are the things I get, but I find that I think about that less and less than I used to. And it's not top of mind for me very often. And I feel really grateful that a part of success for me is being able to just help people get where they want to go and not have to worry too much about what that means for me, at least most of the time. So yeah, that's the first part. I could say more, but I think maybe I'll transition over to you because you grabbed the last question she asked, which is, what feedback have you received over the years about how your actions and behaviors impact others?
I think a lot about feedback, and I'm going to share some reflections about feedback broadly, and then talk about fairly recent, in the last year, feedback that I got from the team that I lead. When it comes to getting feedback on our ideas, as leaders, we can be really effective if we help ourselves and we help other people separate ideas from the people. So can we help create a culture and create norms where ideas can sit out there? They're no longer attached to us. They're not attached to our sense of worth, our sense of value. And can we create this psychological safety that lets us take ideas and be able to build upon them and do so in a way that doesn't unintentionally violate other people's dignity? Because that can be tough. So if we model that as a leader, that can be helpful. But just to also recognize as leaders that, my gosh, that is very hard for many people to do and is going to take some real strengths to be able to make that a norm, culturally speaking. And then when it comes to the results, if you're going to have these kinds of helpful retrospectives, how did we do at achieving what we wanted to do in the first place? We're going to need to get more effective at deciding in advance how we're going to measure success, and then do that favor to our future selves, both as individuals and also as a team, to be able to know we'll be able to look back effectively. Did we achieve what we had hoped to achieve? It is very easy to lose sight of why we were doing things in the first place and then not get very effective feedback on ultimately what we were able to achieve. And then finally, when we think about the how, as we were traveling toward what we had aspired to do, this is where I think gets back to her question, back to Margaret's questions. What feedback have I received over the years about how my actions and behaviors impact others? To me, this is really what I honed in on about the question. How have I been able to get feedback about, and I hate, it's such an overused cliche, but this idea of a journey. I mean, that, we are traveling together. We have come together. We have shared our ideas, our hopes, our dreams, our struggles, the challenges, and then we're on our way. And as we are going, what role was I able to play in pursuing those things? And I was invited at my university to give a session on high-performing teams just under a year ago. And I remember feeling particularly vulnerable about it because I thought, as much as Dave and I, if listeners don't know this, we met in a Teams class when we were earning our master's degrees.
We did.
I have always been a big fan of Teams. I love that I met Dave in a Teams class, and very early in our relationship, as we fell in love and started to talk about what it would be like to have a life together, I think that is one of the reasons we have a very, very long-term, loving, trust-based relationship, is because we are on the same team. And that is kind of one of those things that we don't easily lose sight of. Certainly we're human beings, so it can happen, usually around something dumb like how someone loads a dishwasher or the temperature or whatever. But generally speaking, we remember that we are on the same team, and that just, my gosh, that just does it. So in this session I was asked to lead, I didn't really understand why I felt so much vulnerability, because growing high-performing teams is something I believe so wholeheartedly in. I am very well read in the topic, and I have been told many times I am very effective at leading high-performing teams. And part of the high-performing teams, for people who might wonder what I mean by that, I'm just going to share a few thoughts around. If I say, what is a high-performing team? I've already mentioned trust and psychological safety. That is an important component to me. Clarity and a shared purpose. I sort of made some mention of that. Healthy conflict and decision-making. Ownership and accountability. And I did talk about this one already. Results and continuous improvement. And finally, serving and supporting one another. So to me, the last thing I'll say about that session that I led, it felt vulnerable to do that, but I thought, that maybe it would help someone to get to hear your reflections on this. And so I thought, well, I could create a very informal self-assessment of, what you could go down it and say, how effectively am I at doing these things? And then I asked the people who report to me, our leadership team, to give feedback to me. First, give feedback on our team. So how well do we, and I'll just read a couple of these off. I feel safe admitting mistakes, uncertainty, or needing help on this team. So I asked the group of people, including me, would we all fill this out? Team members assume good intent and give each other the benefit of the doubt. We can disagree openly without it becoming personal or political. That's just an example of some of these. It's an informal instrument. It's not like it's published anywhere or anything like that. But then I asked them, when I draw from many of your past episodes of Coaching for Leaders, what is one thing, and I asked them to think about it in terms of a behavior that I do that contributes to the health of this high-performing team, what is one thing that I do that holds it back? And last thing I'll say about the question that I'm reflecting on, and also about what Margaret reflected, she had said that she believes that, and it was such a off the cuff. I mean, I don't certainly, where I'm sitting here today, I'm feeling a little bit like I wanted to resist the idea that we take all feedback. And I thought, like, I don't know, because Dave's mentioning getting some hard feedback today that he will find to be helpful. And I got some hard feedback. We needed to sign the new privacy policy for a podcast app. So I went up there. I don't normally look at my reviews for my podcast, but instead I went up there and looked at the reviews. And there was a not nice, not helpful comment up there. And I thought, you know what? I'm having a really hard few weeks here. And I thought, I don't want that swimming around in my head. I just don't. So I texted my friend Carrie and I said, Carrie, I need your help. Because it had to do with how I laugh. This person doesn't like how I laugh, so they can't really stand to listen anymore, because if they listened, then they would be forced to have to listen to me laugh. So I was like, you've told me before that you like my laugh. Would you tell me that again, Carrie? Would you tell me again that you like my laugh? That I'm good company, that's part of who I am. I need to hear that today. Could you tell me that again? Because you have told me it before. I need to hear that today. So I guess, and I don't think Margaret was not the context of that. I don't think Margaret, if she was here with us, I don't think she would say, yes, we should all go read all of the comments on someone's random thing, and one of the things that Carrie had texted me back, she's like, this person doesn't deserve to give you feedback because they clearly haven't been listening for as long, to get the richness of who you are, what you have done for this community of people over all of these years. Like, that's kind of this, like, who do we allow to give us feedback, and to what extent might that be edifying for us? And I think probably if all three of us were talking, including Margaret today, and maybe we'll add Carrie into the mix too, all four of us are talking, that would be an important conversation in terms of knowing ourselves. How might we be molded by the feedback that we get? And I just knew that I didn't want to, this particular day, at this particular season of my life, I did not want to allow that person to live rent-free to the extent that I'm going to be able. So I really wanted to carve out, I wanted to be reminded by somebody who knows me well, but who didn't always know me well, but who has celebrated that part of me before, and to be able to ask for what I needed and what I wanted today. And it was a healing balm to my soul. And I am grateful that we have friends like that who know us and who we can reach out and just be, hey, I need some help here. I need some help. And she already knew I was having a very difficult time. So I was, can you help me here? Can you help me here? So, yeah.
Cool. For the record, I really like your laugh. So you got another fan here.
Yeah. I've been trying on this. I will admit I'm a human being. I am a human being. So I have consciously been trying not to laugh. And then I'm just like, come on, man. We don't got that kind of time. We don't got that kind of time in life.
Yes, to quote Anne Lamott.
We do not
have that kind of time. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for sharing this. I was thinking about what you said about, I'll put this in the notes for everyone. There was we did a beautiful episode with Sheila Heen years ago called Thanks for the Feedback. And she has a whole book on, like, we all get feedback. Some of it's helpful. Some of it, like, we should completely ignore. And then there's, like, a whole bunch of stuff in between. And I really like the way that she's the author, one of the original authors of Difficult Conversations, by the way. She's just a wonderful way of, like, parsing through that and thinking about, we talk so much in leadership about how to give people feedback, and we almost never say anything about how to receive feedback. And she just did a beautiful job of articulating that.
I loved that episode, and it was such a wonderful series of books, not just one book.
Oh, yeah. Her work, her team, amazing. Speaking of feedback, I had another thing that came up I listened to, someone asked me recently, do you listen to all the episodes? And I actually didn't early on, years ago, Bonni. And then you told me, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago when you started a podcast, like, oh, I listen to every episode because I want to hear, like, what I said and, like, speaking of feedback, like learn from what I could do differently and better and all that. And I thought, wow, that's a really good idea. And ever since then, I've listened to every episode, which going back 10, 11, 12 years. And I was listening to the episode that David Hutchins and I aired together, episode 755, on how to lead a meaningful cultural shift. David is our resident storytelling expert. He's amazing. I've known him for years. Every time he comes on the show, I just love talking to him. So many of you reach out and tell me how much you appreciate David's work and all his storytelling resources. And on that episode, he was telling a story about Gary Ridge, who was the former CEO of WD-40, just a unbelievably respected leader, has done some amazing things, has written a book. And he told the story about, he was making the point about leaders go first. Like leaders should take the first step in demonstrating all kinds of things. And I fully agree with that. And he told a story about how apparently Gary had at one point when he was CEO of WD-40 had done a 360 where he collected all the feedback, all the things people said about him that were nice, but all the things that people said that were critical, and sent it out to the entire company for people to be able to read it. And he was really working on starting a conversation around transparency and culture and sharing feedback and all that, which was awesome. And I'm so glad he mentioned that because it was a great example of the point he was making about leaders going first. And I listened to that and I thought right after that episode aired, ooh, I hope most people don't think to do that. And the reason that I had that thought was I think what Gary did was great as CEO and like sending that out. I think most leaders should be pretty careful about doing something like that. And I have had a whole bunch of times over the years, Bonnie, where either we've done something in our academy or I've been supporting a leader who got an assessment and got one of those like huge 360s or big reports or it was like 75-page report. And they came to me or us and said, hey, should I send this out to my team? Should I send this out to people in the organization? And it's I love the intention behind that of like, oh, I want to be transparent. I want people to see the full version of me and see the struggles and see the critical things so that they see that I'm willing to learn and grow and get feedback and all those things. And I think if you're the CEO and you're someone like Gary Ridge and you're doing that, if you're the top person and you have and it's safe for you to do that, which I think if you're the CEO, it is most of the time, as a cultural opportunity to set the culture and tone. I think that's a great thing to do. I think for the average senior director in most large organizations, I would be really careful about doing that. And the reason is because it's so easy when you send out something that's just got so much data and information in it for someone to zero in on one thing on page 74, one quote that may or may not be true about you. Speaking of feedback, Bonnie, and like what's valuable and what's not, like how easy it would be for anyone on the internet to pull up like all the reviews of you and I and our podcast. And we send out that whole documentation to everyone and someone like cherry pick one thing that was said of like, oh, someone said this. And then all of a sudden start to build a narrative around that. And I just have seen that happen so many times in organizations where someone like sends out something really well intended and then someone pulls something around that and then starts to create a narrative that's really not helpful. And it doesn't reflect who you are. It doesn't reflect what message you wanted to send out. So the reason I'm bringing this up is I think the intention of sharing feedback and letting people know what you're working on is wonderful. I encourage people to do that all the time. I encourage our Academy members to do that all the time. I would curate it a bit though, especially if you're sending it out in an organization where there may not be a lot of psychological safety. And if there isn't, you might even be hesitant about doing that at all. But I think you also shape a bit of that narrative. Yes, mention the things you're not doing well, but also mention those things that you think are valuable feedback and that you're planning to move on. And the things that are well, mentioning those things and highlighting those. And I also think making that much more concise for people. Don't make people do the work to figure out what are the things they should pay attention to. You as a leader, if you're going to be sending out feedback that you've received, make it easy for people to decide what are the positive things, what are the things that you're working on and you're going to demonstrate and you've also committed to do. And I think if you put a little bit of thought and effort behind that, I think that goes so much more effectively for you.
I was going to mention back to the feedback that I had received through that very informal instrument. The thing that I found particularly helpful was very zeroed in. What is one thing, one behavior that I do that contributes? What is one thing, one behavior that I do that holds us back? And specifically in terms of what is one behavior that holds us back, something that I appreciated about the feedback is that there was a lot of nuance around a lack of clarity around roles, but it very quickly went to where there have been lots of changes, over years, when I think back to how much massive change has gone on, it was really helpful to me because I'll tend to put too much on myself. Like I would want there not to be a lack of clarity about people's roles, but it was so nice to read in there. Sometimes we did, because that was one of the questions, by the way. There was a question around roles and expectations are clear. We know who is doing what. And that was the one that they all, by the way, had very nice scores. Yay, I win the prize, I guess. Mm-hmm. But this was the one that still had a high score, but was not as high as the other ones. But They wrote on there, because I asked for behavioral input, they can't think of how any leader would have not had, not a perfect score on that, because that just such a massive amount of change. And if you read about and learn about organizational change, you actually need to be good at setting up these temporary systems to navigate the ambiguity. And they celebrated that about me. I wanted to also echo what you said, Dave, just about, I was trying to think while you were sharing your input, I can't imagine why it would ever be helpful for anyone to send out an entire thing. Because like you said, it's just too much. There's too much to take in.
Yeah.
And unless you're working with people that are really good, most 360s, it is too much because it's so broad.
Yeah.
And unless your organization is committed to those things that it's measuring for years and years and years across the entire organization, that can be a lot. So that's just something to be really, really careful about. But yeah, not asking people to do the work, but also not asking yourself to do the work. It's too much. It gets confusing when you get that much feedback and you don't know how to translate that into action, into specific concrete things that you can begin to mold and become patterns for yourself. Goodness gracious. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and if you don't shape the story, a story will be told about you that someone else will shape. And I think someone else still may shape the story, but if you lead with the story, if you, rather than just sending out a bunch of data and kind of hoping people pick whatever is going to be relevant, I think you shape the narrative if you're sending out feedback. Here's what I've found, here's what I heard that I'm good at. Here are the 2 or 3 things that I heard that aren't working. There may be 14, but here's the 2 or 3 that I heard, and here's the 2 or 3 I'm going to move on to make some shift on. I think you're doing so much better than the average leader. And if you do that, huge. Okay. The final reflection point. I met a group of our members, our Academy members and graduates in Boston not long ago, Bonni, earlier this year. And we had a wonderful conversation. And we were talking about crossroads and the crossroads that people were at. And one of the folks in the room, just someone I just love dearly and has just been an extraordinary leader in our community over the years, he said, I've had a really tough time the last year or so with just leadership in our organization. And clearly a bunch had happened where he has become very disillusioned, understandably, given what's happened, org politics, restructuring stuff. He's like, I've become very disillusioned with this word leadership. And I was thinking about what you texted Carrie. He said, I just need people to tell me tonight that something broader with leadership beyond just the corporate whatever stuff that we often think about leadership. I just need to hear something a little bit more bigger about leadership other than just restructuring and budgets and all that stuff. And as I reflect on the conversation we had that evening, I wasn't a part of all the smaller conversations that happened. I was thinking, I don't know if we really answered his question. Some of us did, but I don't know if we ever did. And so I've been thinking about that question for the last few weeks. And I had a bigger picture thought about leadership. And my bigger picture thought is the thing that I think about a lot is parenting and our kids around leadership. And there was, when Obama was elected back in 2008, there was tons of crises going on. There was bird flu, there was the financial crisis, there was 8 or 9 things that when he took office were these massive, huge front page news stories of all this chaos going on in the world. And I remember hearing a interview that one of the major networks sat down with him and did an interview. And the question was asked of him, something to the effect of, where do you entertain the most doubt? And he did not hesitate in his answer at all. He said, I entertain the most doubt of being a dad right now. And like trying to think of like how to support my girls and all this stuff. And he went on and talked about being a dad and doubt. And I remember hearing that interview and just being so irritated with him at the time of thinking, you have all this stuff that like we as a public just elected you to handle. And the places you're entertaining doubt is parenting. Like that's the thing that comes up. And now all these years later, Bonni, having now become a parent, I think like how true that answer is for me. Like I've come 180 degrees on it of thinking now as a parent, as a father, there are a lot of places I entertain doubt on things, but the place that I probably entertain the most doubt is as a parent and trying to decide like what's the right, where do I intervene? Where do I step back? Screen time things. But I was just thinking like when I think about leadership and when I really like think about how do I do a better job and how do I take the things that I learn on this show and try to get better, oftentimes the first place I'm thinking about it is with our kids and like how do I do a better job of showing up as a parent well. And I don't know if there's an answer in there anywhere, but that's just what was coming on my mind of thinking about the broader, like what really matters with leadership. Yeah, there's all the business, corporate, organizational, nonprofit things that we all think about with leadership. But I think at the end of the day, for me, it comes down to family. Then how do I show up there or not? And that's the hardest part.
I loved this question. I loved that it didn't have an easy resolution because I don't think that that's possible. I've been thinking a lot about death because I've been spending time in hospitals, or shall I say a hospital. And it's weird to record an episode like this because they're always recorded.
Not because of your health, just to be clear, so people know like you're fine.
Yes.
Some extended family stuff going on.
Yes. So, but it's weird to record it nevertheless because despite the news that we are all someday going to pass away, it's just not knowing what life will look like when this airs. But I just wanted to share that context. That in addition to that, there's also been some coming changes at my organization. So I have been thinking about this, not just every day, but almost every moment of every day. And something that keeps rising up for me comes from a poem by Marge Piercy. It's called To Be of Use. And as soon as I read Dave's reflections on this question or series of questions, I thought, part of why I also wrestle with words like corporate and leadership when it's, used in certain and scaling and efficiency and all the things.
10x, baby. 10x.
Some aspects of artificial intelligence, it depends what, aspect of it we're talking about. But yeah, 10x. Yeah. I think because it just comes down to like, what difference does it make? So that this contrast keeps coming up in my own mind as I think about my own purpose is to not be used up, but to be of use. And, I'm just thinking about the trips to the hospital and like seeing the volunteers that are there. I'm very intrigued by the way, I don't, fortunately, I haven't had a lot of experience in hospitals, so it feels very new to me. And just, I'm very curious about what leads a person to volunteer at a hospital. What I'm so curious, every person that I would see, I would think, I wonder what brought you here. And then even the security guards were so kind and helpful and things. So anyway, I just wanted to read a little bit. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Dave is going to put it in the show notes. I would encourage you to go and read. This is To Be of Use by Marge Piercy. She writes, "The people I love best jump into work head first without dallying in the shallows and swim off with sure strokes almost out of sight. They seem to become natives of that element, the black, sleek heads of seals bouncing like half-submerged balls." And it just reminded me kind of the other thing that's been resonating with me a lot, Dave, is just I live in the future. That is a great strength of mine. It's not particularly helpful at this exact moment with this exact situation. So practicing, this is what is needed in this moment. This is what is needed in this moment. And that first part of the people I love best jump into the work head first. I loved that. And as I go a little bit later, she writes, I want to be with people who submerge into the task, who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags along, who are not parlor generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm. And what I love about this part is just the idea that we're not designed to do it alone. Sometimes we do it alone and we think we're alone, and we can convince ourselves that we're absolutely alone and how lonely that feels. But I love just this rhythm of idea that we can be in solidarity with others and working toward the common good. I just find this imagery so beautiful. And I'll read the last little bit here of her words. The work of the world is common as mud. Botched, it smears the hands, crumbles to dust, but the thing worth doing well done has a shape that satisfies, clean and evident. Greek amorphous for wine or oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but they were meant to be used. The pitcher cries for water to carry, and a person for work that is real. So I will say to this person who is wrestling with words like corporate and leadership and 360s that are not done well, et cetera, I will say to you, that's the human yearning for work that is real.
3 past episodes came up directly in our conversation. One of them is episode 143, How to Get Way Better at Accepting Feedback. We talked about Sheila Heen's wisdom on that, and of course the perspective that oftentimes we learn how to give feedback. We don't often think much or have done a lot of practice on how to receive feedback. Episode 143 is a step-by-step how to think about it for all of us. Also recommended episode 750, 6 questions every leader should ask themselves. Margaret Andrews was my guest on that episode. Bonni and I responded to 2 of those questions. There's 4 more. A very insightful conversation from her and a great starting point for thinking about how to lead more effectively. And of course, leadership starts with us first being able to lead ourselves well. Episode 750 for that. And then I mentioned the episode with David Hutchins, How to Lead a Meaningful Cultural Shift. Episode 755. That's when he mentioned the story from Gary Ridge. So many wonderful concepts from that conversation. And David, an expert in storytelling, also one of our expert partners here at Coaching for Leaders. And if your organization is looking at making a cultural shift or thinking about how to communicate differently in the season ahead, David and his team, an extraordinary resource for doing that. So many of you in our community have reached out to him over the years and have brought him in to do so much great work with your teams. If getting better at storytelling, messaging, making those shifts is important now, episode 755, a great start. And of course, feel free to reach out to David directly. All of those conversations you can find on the coachingforleaders.com website. And I'd love to have you hop on and let us know what you thought of this conversation today. You can hit the contact button. And should we keep doing reflection conversations like this? Also, you might receive my Focus 5 mailer each week. You can hit reply on that and let me know. And if you don't receive it, the best way to get access to it is by going over to coachingforleaders.com, setting up your free membership, because it's going to give you the ability to search all of our past episodes by topic, including the ones I mentioned. And you'll also begin receiving the Focus 5 message each week. Every single week, I am finding 5 things, 5 topics on a theme that I think will be helpful to you in how you're learning and growing and leading effectively. Every week that comes to you on email. The best way to get access to it is just setting up your free membership at coachingforleaders.com. Coaching for Leaders is edited by Andrew Kroger. Next Monday, I am glad to welcome Gustavo Rossetti back to the show. We are going to be talking about how to help a team get unstuck, something all of us need to do in our leadership roles. Join me for that conversation with Gustavo. See you next week. Take care.